So today we are doing transmission drain and fill and oil pan on my 2006 Corolla XRS. It's starting to leak oil on the floor, my garage floor. Not very much, but still don't like it. And also drain and fill on the transmission since it's time to do that. So started by draining the oil. You need a 14mm socket, and then the oil filter's just right there. I'll show you in a second because I'm on the top of the car, but here we go. So for the transmission, this bolt right there, it's a 10mm Allen right there, right in the front, to undo that, and then a 24mm socket right there. And I'll show you the drain plug here in a second. So we'll undo always undo the fill plug first, in case you can't get it off, but you should be able to. It might take a little bit of force, but you're not going to strip it. Okay, we got the plug out. You see the hole? That's the fill plug. That's the fill plug. Like I said, it's a 10mm Allen. I'm crap, but that is the plug. And right there, that's where it's draining from. That's where grab the light. Right there, that plug right there, that's 24mm. Pretty close to the driver's side frame. And I have my oil draining right now. Not sure if I'm going to have to remove this beam or not. Probably will to do the oil pan, but the transmission really shouldn't have to. And the reason why I still have the plug in there is because if you undo it, it goes all over the place. So I just going to let it drain slow. And then, so pull the oil filter. Oil filter's right there. Pull that and start working on this pan here. I'll show you that. So, oil's still leaking from the oil filter. So there's where the oil filter goes. And you got a whole bunch of bolts all the way around the pan. Over here, on this side. And right there. So those are 10mm, so we're going to be taking those out. And I'm going to take out this bar, at least make it movable. So how you do that, you have to remove this bolt up front. So this bolt right here, this bolt, not this bolt or this bolt, but there's 4 in these holes. That holds the motor mount, the front motor mount in. Oh, sorry. One, you can see it. 1, 2, and then you have to remove a through bolt for the front motor mount. And we'll show you that. It's up here in the front. Right there. That's the front motor mount. And then, or I could just try to do it without it, but I don't think so. So these look like they're 14s. 14mm. They're going to be tight. So, and then remove these pins. You just stick a screwdriver in the side of them and pull them down, and they come right out. So they will break, and they're like $1.50 a piece at the dealer, but I just use zip ties when they break. So we'll go to that point. So remove this cover. There's 2, see the little plastic yellow things, there's 2 screws in there, 10mm. That's on outside in the wheel, but you can get them with a wrench. And then you can see that I moved this bar over. So I took out 2 bolts down there to let it swivel. So if you look at the previous picture, you'll see this bolt I removed right there, and that one right there, both 14s. And then I removed these two bolts right here, and then I removed the two bolts going in the motor mount, which is right there. That's the front motor mount, and it's okay to undo that, and the engine's not going anywhere with one motor mount not holding it up. It's not going anywhere, even though I have it up on the ramps. So the objective here is to get all these little bolts, and I'm just going to use a 10mm socket on a 1/4 inch drive, because there's not much room in between the bolts and the oil pan there. Take them all out. Okay, so they're all out, and we did get all of those bolts and 3 nuts. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 bolts and 3 nuts. So the nuts go right there. See that stud? Let's see if I can focus. It's right there. Right there. And then there's 2 over here on the side. So now we just need to be really careful not to bend the pan, but what you want to do is separate it from the block. See the excess gasket right there. And then just work your way around, just very gently, not to scrape. You don't want to scrape the aluminum block, and you don't want to bend the oil pan. So you just want to be really careful. Just use a small screwdriver and kind of separate it, and we'll see what it looks like. I got the oil pan off, and you can see all this residue. That actually looks really clean. I've been using full synthetic ever since I got this car, with about 65,000 miles, and now it has 95,000 miles. And you can see all this residue from the gasket. We are going to clean that off just with a putty knife. You can see where I hammered it, unfortunately, and made a couple little marks. Let's see if we can get this thing to focus here. Yeah. So anyway, right there in the middle of the screen I made a tiny little mark, and then right here tiny little mark, but otherwise it's pretty clean. It's leaking pretty bad. It was leaking pretty bad over there in the far corner. Right. Over there is where it was leaking the most, and it was actually leaking onto the transmission. Transmission's draining right now, so I put some silicone on there and changed the oil, and then noticed it got a lot cleaner after I changed the oil, so I figured it was the oil pan. And I looked up into the clutch, and there was no evidence of leaking in the main oils, the main oil seal between the clutch and the transmission. So I'm glad about that, because I do not want to do the clutch in this car again. It was a nightmare. So we'll clean that all up and get that all squared away, and then show you how to put the gasket on. Okay, so we're all cleaned up. So this is what I'm going to use to put the gasket back on. This is FIPG at Toyota. Part number is right there. Probably need that to start with. It comes in a huge tube. This is what my oil pan looks like now. Kind of scratched a little bit, trying to get all the crap off. But what's important is that this flat part, you'll notice 2 ridges on each side, and then a flat part. The flat part's totally 100% clean, minus some scratches here. So what I'll do is I'll evenly distribute the FIPG, and also I cleaned off the block completely, and to make sure I get a good clean, I used brake cleaner. You can see that whole surface is entirely clean except for a little bit of oil that's dripping right there. 100% clean of any gasket, and that's what you want. So, and then so probably help just to put the 3 nuts on first. So 1, 2 on that side and 1 on the back. It's back there. Put those 3 nuts on first. Once you get it into place, those will help you guide it into place, and that's why they're there. And and put the nuts on, and then put the bolts in. And you just want to do them finger tight for right now. And I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so nuts are on here. You can see that one. Started putting in the bolts. So I start them by hand, and just so they're flush, and then I'll go back and go through them. So basically, to torque these, I'm not a big fan of torquing because they don't ever torque anything at the factory. You'll see them just put stuff together. Basically, I have lots of practice putting on gaskets, so I'd recommend a torque wrench if you're new at this. But start them all by hand until they're flush, and then torque them across. So you'll do like this one, and like across here, and then this one here, and then over here, and you just go in a crisscross pattern all the way around. Okay, so we got all the bolts in. Got all the bolts in here. Let's see, what I may have. Sorry. There we go. So all the bolts are in. They're all pretty much flush, except for a couple of them. I did put what I did on the oil pan. Is I put the sealant, the FIPG, on the inside. So instead of on the outside, right over here, I put it on the inside of the bolts, on the inside towards the inside of the pan. And so I got a little sealant into the bolt holes, which is fine. That's not a problem. What that does is it seals it all the way instead of finding a way around the bolt hole to leak. So now what I'll do is I'll just slowly tighten these up, bolt by bolt, going crisscross in a crisscross pattern here, and should be all set to go. Okay, so done with the torquing. So now I'll just put everything back together. Obviously new oil. I'll show you this. See, barely see the black. That's good all the way around. I used probably 3/4 of that tube of FIPG on this, just alone on this oil pan. So quite a bit. You can't put too much. You can definitely put too little. So one thing I did forget to mention, I did pull off the flywheel cover. It goes right there, in between the engine and the transmission right there. So I'll put this bar back in and put an oil filter in, and probably wait a little bit before I run it, but definitely safe to put oil in, probably. So that pretty much is it, and then you'll just fill 2 quarts of transmission fluid into the transmission through that hole. It's right there, and I use a funnel with a big fat straw. It's about that big around, going down into there so I can pour it from the top. I do use Redline MTL or MT90, either one. I think there's only 5 weight difference between them. So hope you enjoyed the video, and hope this helps you doing an oil pan on a Corolla. So now the car is up and running. You can see I'm looking at the oil pan right now. I don't see any visible leaks so far. It's that nice outer coat of the FIPG. Very nice. So yeah, this concludes the video, and I did fill the transmission. Got 2 quarts of oil for the transmission.